All right, boys, so today we're going to be taking a look at some of the best teams currently in Regulation F. Essentially, what your boy here has done is, I've gone onto Top Cut Explorer, I've grabbed, 10 open sheets for some of the best teams. I tried to keep them as diverse as possible, because, a little bit of backstory, I guess, before we jump into it. Essentially, I'm prepping for the Melbourne Regional coming up this weekend. And I'm pretty sure we'll see a lot of, people basically just ripping teams out, or at least a lot of the top, players will be using, pretty common cores, unless, of course, someone finds some, basic, so basically something that's like the answer to the meta, right? The source, if you will. So essentially, I've gone and grabbed the top teams, I've recreated them in an attempt to basically, look at them, figure out some lines into them, and, of course, just, basically do some testing, right? And, making sure I have a good understanding of what, is coming up in the metagame. So yeah, I've grabbed the top 10 teams, 10 of the top teams, basically 10 teams, again, I think are just going to be kind of popular at my event. And then, yeah, I've kind of gone through, I've given, EV spreads to them. So if you guys want, obviously you can test them out on ladder. There's nothing like super duper crazy with them. They're very, very generic in a sense. Like a lot of these mods I haven't done, a lot of, like a lot of in-depth testing with. So like, I know kind of the benchmarks they want to hit, but I don't know any like super duper specific where it's like, oh, you need X amount of attack, X amount of bulk, blah, blah, blah. Some of them I do, some of them I don't. Anyway, let's just jump into some of the teams. So the first team we're going to be looking at here is, I believe it's Niall Dunlop's team. Nils, I don't exactly know how to pronounce the name. I apologize. Nils Dunlop's team, they got top 16. I forget exactly what tournament order I went in here. I believe this was the Portland Regional Championships, not Charlotte. I think Charlotte will be like the back end of the teams we start looking at here. But this was a very interesting team. As you can see here, it is a, it's kind of like, it is the first Blood Moon team we're going to look at, but it's not the only one. Really, the main reason I kind of put this team on here is because of an interesting tech that I do think we'll see pick up, which is the Entei and, the Torkoal here. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, I believe there was a player who got really high on ladder. They might have hit number 1 with it, or, they got very, very high up on the ladder. I forget exactly how high they went. But essentially, it's like, hey, we've got this Trick Room mode, right, with Torkoal. Obviously, Torkoal's out here, with Eruption in the Sun, Overheat as well. Helping Hand is another cool tech here, which is paired up with the Entei, which is also another Eruption mod on this team. So if you have a look at it, obviously, Terrifier plus Choice Scarf here. You've got the Eruption with, 4 physical attacks, which is why, the set here is kind of split up. I'm not entirely sure if they were like, I know they weren't timid because I know they want to use their attack stat. I don't know if they were naive or what is the other one? There's another option for it too. Naive or, oh, why am I blind here? There's another one that's like plus speed minus defense or something. Plus speed, not jolly. Hasty, that's the other one. I'm not sure if they were hasty or naive. I guess hasty would make their defenses kind of similar. I went naive simply because I think physical defense is more important in the metagame right now. But essentially, the gist of this core is like, hey, I've got my Torkoal mode. It's very very, very slow. Torkoal is one of the best answers to Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and Trick Room because it is one of the few Pokemon that will just always underspeed it, right? So you've got, max special attack here. It's like, hey, my Eruption's going to absolutely slap, especially when I've got Giraffe here with Helping Hand. If I'm running my own Trick Room mode, of course, then we also have Blood Moon, Ursaluna here as well. Again, this is just another really strong one under Trick Room. Again, you talk about Helping Hand, right? Helping Hand in Trick Room with Blood Moon, Ursaluna. It's very, very strong, right? And then you also have like this fast mode where you're like, hey, I've got this fast sun mode where I've got Torkoal, which, with Helping Hand can buff up my Flutter Mane, it can buff up my Entei. And the cool thing too as well with this Flutter Mane is like, it definitely deals a bit of damage, but of course with the Trick Room, it's just another Trick Room setter. So you can lead something like the Flutter Mane Ogerpon, make him think, hey, he's going offensive here. And then all of a sudden, the Ogerpon just like, follow me, the Flutter Mane, like Trick Rooms because maybe you led something super hyper offensive. And then all of a sudden, they're going to start looking to sweep you on a Trick Room. Now, one big thing here I'll quickly touch on. So I'm assuming the Flutter Mane on this set was very bulky, plus it was speed booster. Obviously, so I've gone, I've gone modest here, but still hitting that 180. 180 basically allows you to outspeed things like Ogerpon and Tornadus. And then, of course, when you pair it up with Torkoal, you get the speed boost, and then Torkoal can give you the Helping Hand boost as well to kind of buff up that attack stat, right? Essentially, that was kind of the idea behind that. The Ogerpon, now this one could go completely 2 different ways. This could be like super bulky Brave for all I know, or it could be this set here that I have, which is just max. If I had to guess, it would probably be something in the middle. I guess if I had to guess what this thing actually is, I would probably say it's something along the lines of like maybe this, where maybe you hit like that 150. You could even go a bit faster, hit that 157. And then basically you're just like looking at like maxing out the bulk there with a little bit of attack, right? I don't know exactly what the numbers would be. Something like this as well, I think could be decent. It could even, for all I know, be something like this, and you're running like the Ogerpon water set, right? Where you're going something like this with like 100 here. Then you like hit that second, you don't actually get to hit the second bump, that's sad. So maybe you hit something like that and you just pump a bit of speed, right? This one could be anything. I honestly don't know. As I said, it could even be like Brave minimum speed. But the rest of the sets I do think are pretty on point, or at least close enough to what they would be. I do believe I have seen spreads for the Entei, and this is what it is. But yeah, look, this is definitely a cool team to keep an eye out for, especially too, because like if you're not ready for the Scarf Entei, it's like, hey, you know, we're gonna go Helping Hand Eruption, or it's like, hey, this is just kind of a fast support that's gonna spam out like, you know, Sacred Fires and basically burn your whole team. But yeah, pretty cool team. Now, this team here by Kazuki, this is not the first time I believe we've seen a team like this. This is essentially Archaladon Rain. I don't know if this was the team Brady Smith popularized or VGC Corner, or slightly along those lines. But look, Archaladon Rain, it's pretty damn good. Obviously, the team kind of centered around Pelipper here, paired up with Archaladon. Pelipper's a great support on a team like this because, like, with the Focus Sash set, it, you know, outspeeds, you know, a decent amount of things, especially if you get the Tailwind up. Not to mention, too, Hurricane and Weather Ball in Rain can both deal a lot of damage. And with Terra Stella as well, it's pretty decent because, like, one, this one doesn't really want a defensive Terra. And two, you know, it has two really powerful stabs, right? Base 110 and then, of course, base 100 in the Rain. Just very, very good. And this mod also having Wide Guard support is fantastic, especially with, you know, things like Fluttermane and Chiyu running around, right? Because all of a sudden, you know, you could lead it with your Archaladon. It's like, hey, you can't kind of click Heat Wave and you kind of can't click, you know, Dazzling Gleam Snarls here. So, you know, that is kind of nice. It is very good for that kind of stuff. Of course, Archaladon, though, this mod's job is basically to get into the Rain. You know, it's got the Assault Vest, right? It's got the Stamina. It's very, very bulky with quite a bit of, you know, special attack. The speeds here on this essentially is just to outspeed, or, you know, speed creep a lot of things in Tailwind. Because this is booster speed with Icy Wind as well, I did hit 112. 112 basically just means you can outspeed a lot of, you know, base 100s. If you really want it as well, actually, it's probably even better doing this, because I believe this, after an Icy Wind, will outspeed Landorus Incarnate. Sorry, Timid max speed Landorus Incarnate, I should say, which is obviously very, very nice as well. And then a lot of the sets here are just super, super standard, right? This is the Urshifu set I've personally been running for quite a while, especially when I'm pairing it with Weather. Essentially, the bulk, while it doesn't allow you to live Landorus Incarnate all of the time, it is a role that's definitely in your favor. I think like Landorus Eye clicking Earth Power or like Sludge Bomb is like a 19% chance to KO you. And because of that, I do like running it. If you wanted, obviously you could run a bit more. I personally really like hitting 144 just for things like Scarf, Landorus Incarnate, sorry, Landorus Therian. That is obviously Adamant. But 144 is just a nice speed tier to hit, especially when you are pairing it up with things like Choice Scarf and Tailwind. The Fluttermane, I'll quickly touch on this one as well. This is just like the super bulky support Fluttermane, right? The Moonblast and Shadow Ball still do a decent amount just because Fluttermane does hit naturally pretty hard. The bulk is just very, very nice as well. And of course, we're max speed. Simply because a lot of, you know, speed booster Fluttermanes nowadays are going max speed. I'm sure if you really wanted to like invest more in bulk, you could run something like 190. But right now, you know, if you're using this mod, it kind of feels weird to not be max speed just because everyone feels like they're, you know, they're just running max speed, which is obviously, yeah, kind of frustrating. Amoonguss, though, this mod, fantastic support in Rain. I'm not going to go too much into it, right? It's very, very standard. Terra Dark allows you to obviously stop Pranks to Taunt. It's a fantastic support in Rain because obviously, the Rain obviously covers the Fire weakness. And then, of course, it puts stuff to sleep. It redirects. It heals up stuff like, you know, your Archaladons. It's just fantastic. And then finally, Big Bad Baxcalibur. This is just, you know, a pretty offensive Bax. Its job really on this team is to kind of come in and just pump out damage. Really, I just hit the, you know, the final bump on the attack there, dump the rest into HP while hitting the speed tier I wanted. You could definitely run this slower. I basically just went for 116 because a lot of Rillabooms, especially now that Heatran isn't as popular in the metagame, are running a little bit slower. You know, you're never really going to see too many that are above 114. And if they are, they're investing a lot in speed. So at that point, it's like, what's the point of trying to creep them? So I like just hitting 116. I think it's a nice speed tier. It's also decent for like Annihilates as well, because they do kind of end up, you know, in that, you know, similar speed tier. And yeah, it just means like, hey, if I get to go first and click my Great Flavor's Rush, great. Same with Icicle Crash. It's just fantastic. And if not, you know, I still absolutely slap with them, right? You know, it can tank a hit because it's super bulky and then just fire off really powerful stabs. Yeah, I think it offers, you know, a lot of, you know, utility on a team like, you know, these Pelipper's teams, especially too when you got things like Icy Wind support, you've got Tailwind, right? You've got Redirection, you've got some other mods as well that kind of demand a lot of attention. So Baxcalibur can kind of, you know, just sneak in there and just start firing off some massive attacks. Now we have JosephUG's top 16 team. As everyone knows, as everyone should know, because I say it all the goddamn time. Joe beat me in the winning in last year at OCIC, so I kind of always root for him because I'm like, hey, that guy, he eliminated me from a tournament, so go him. But yeah, look, this is just I don't want to say a standard, like, you know, Power Knight team here, but it is, you know, a pretty cool adaptation to it, right? It's essentially, you know, 5 mons that really like pairing up with GM Power, I should say 4 mons plus GM Power. And then an Amoonguss, because, you know, Amoonguss is just a great support, right? Obviously, you got the Power Knight here, just a very, very standard Sash set. The 4 defense, always put your 4 defense here. It allows you to live Surging Strikes, you know, most of the time, which I do think is very important. I believe non-Terra Surging Strikes will never KO, even if they're like Adamant 252. Of course, D-Knight as well. This is an Assault Vest set coming out of Joe here rather than the Banded set. But still, it's kind of just a very, very basic set, right? You're kind of trying to hit max HP. Because you've got the Assault Vest, you really just kind of want to get as much HP as possible to kind of, you know, obviously make it as efficient as possible. And then 108 kind of is just the minimum speed tier, I would suggest. Really because the minimum a lot of other people go will be 107. But this isn't a one that necessarily needs a lot of speed. So yeah, I think, you know, going 108, it's decent. It allows you to, you know, outspeed a lot of threats, you know, that aren't like super, super fast already. And of course, you know, this is just it's got ear speed, it's got sheer power, it does things, right? The Ogre Pawn set though, this is just the super standard one, right? This is like the really bulky support. Basically, this spread will allow you to live like opposing bandit D-Knight E-speeds. It obviously still allows you to do quite a bit of damage, you know, with the attack stat here. And again, it's just a really bulky redirection one, right? It's the second redirection one on the team. So its job is kind of, you know, to allow the other ones to set up. But when you pair it up with something like King Gambit, who, you know, could potentially just set up a Howl, all of a sudden this support Ogre Pawn can start slapping, especially too if your opponent is running a more bulky balanced team, or even like say a slower Trick Room mode, right? All of a sudden you can get it to +1. And, you know, this is nothing to, you know, nothing to scoff at, right? 165 is still pretty decent. You get that to +1. All of a sudden, you know, you're hitting for 240, which is obviously very, very strong. You know, I briefly touched on Gouging Fire there, but on this team, it's really just like, it's a booster speed set, right? Terra Fairy is just a good defensive typing on it. And then it's got Howl. It's got good support in, you know, breaking swipes here. Burning Bulwark also is really broken if you can catch the right mon with it. And of course, Heat Crash is just a lot of damage, right? It allows you to pump out a lot of damage into Flutter Mains. I'm pretty sure after a Howl, you like KO every variant of Flutter Main. I could be wrong. Maybe the super bulky ones live it, but I highly, highly doubt it. And then you just got Gambit. I don't actually have a nature on this because I'm a noob. This is just the Black Glasses SD. Oh, this actually isn't SD. I thought this was SD. I don't know why I thought Joe had it. But yeah, this is just a super standard set I like to run. If you wanted to, you could even just like drop this honestly and just pump it into attack and just go max. It's really up to you. I personally just like hitting bumps and then kind of dumping the rest into defense. Because again, a lot of the time, you know, I don't play enough Gambit to actually know if there's like a specific calc that needs this. And if there is, I do apologize. But yeah, look, you still Terra, you know, you Terra Dragon, you got the Black Glasses, you're still doing a lot of damage. If you ever get intimidated, this mod starts doing a lot of work. And of course, if you ever get the Howl up on it as well, it starts doing a lot of work. And we touched on the Amoonguss at the start. Just it's a standard mod, dude. Grass Knot definitely picking up in usage. I think this is really cool. It allows you to, you know, pump out a lot of damage into things like Ursalunas and Urshifus, which obviously is very nice. Now, we have AlexSOS top 16 team here. Now, this is the hard Psy-Spam Trick Room. Now, a lot of this stuff here is, you know, pretty damn simple. You know, indeed here, it's got the Terra Fairy. The Terra Fairy allows it to live things like Dark Pulses and Wicked Blows. Obviously, we're just going like, you know, max here, essentially. Just making sure we're as bulky as possible on the physical end. Especially too because this one is, you know, one of your best answers into things like, you know, Power Knight, for example, trying to run through your team. You know, Terra Fairy with Rocky Helmet, you know, allows you to break sashes. And then, of course, just, you know, kind of allows you Hatterene or whatever, you know, your supportive choices to kind of just, you know, run through them essentially, right? King Gambit, we've just touched on this set essentially, right? This could be just however you want it. The reason I don't have any defense investment here is because I do believe on this team it was Brave Nature. I could be wrong, but the Brave Nature obviously allows you to underspeed things like Blood Moon Ursaluna, which could be a massive threat for this mod in Trick Room, especially when it's paired up with things like Giraffe, right? The last thing you want is the Blood Moon Ursaluna to underspeed you in your own Trick Room and just KO you. So because of that, you know, we're just Brave here. We hit the bump, we pumped a bit into Spadef and just went max HP. Terra Dark Dreadplate, though, does do a lot of damage, right? Especially because you are a Defiant Mon. Gallade here, apparently I didn't do EVs for Gallade. This mon just kind of really wants to live. It actually does put out a lot of damage as well. Which is one thing I do like about Gallade here. I do think you probably want a bit of physical defense investment. I don't know entirely what kind of spreads they go for. If I had to guess, it would be something like this with a Brave Nature. Again, it could be more HP, sorry, more attack, it could be more defense. But this mon's job really is to kind of survive, you know, potentially get up Trick Room if needed. Wide Guard to support things like, you know, obviously your Iron Crowns, your Hatterenes, even your Torkols as well, but also pump out a lot of damage, right? This is a very, very good answer into things like the Flutter Mains, right? And the Chiyus, because, you know, if they lead like their Flutter Main Chiyu, all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, now we can't just go like Dazzling Gleam, Heat Wave, right? And just basically, you know, nuke the Trick Room setter through the redirection because, you know, of this, right? And then, of course, you know, if you're going for something like if you're going for something like Indeedee and they're like, say, Speed Boost or Flutter Main, all of a sudden it's like, hey, I can live a Moonblast plus a Dark Pulse, and because of that, you know, I can go for like the redirection plus Trick Room. But of course, you could even just do stuff like, hey, I'm going to set the Trick Room up with Indeedee here. If I get flinched, it is what it is. I'm just going to Sacred Sword down the Chiyu and just one-shot it. So it is a really cool mon. Sharpness is awesome, and having Sacred Sword buffed up by the Sharpness is crazy. And even same with Psycho Cutter, right? These moves do a lot of damage thanks to, you know, Sharpness. And this mon also has a pretty nice, you know, physical attack stat here, right? Torkoal, very similar to what we had earlier. This is just deal as much damage as possible under Trick Room. It's very cool. This Iron Crown set, now this is one that I think you could definitely change up depending on how you want to play it. I have seen people on lighter playing sets like this where they are just straight up minimum speed, right? They're the quiet, you hit the final bump. You just put the rest into bulk, and your job is like, hey, I'm going to pair this up with Indeedee. If I'm not that threatened by you, I can just go for, expanding force with helping hand. If I am threatened, obviously just get up the, the trick room and start sweeping under. I also do think the speed booster set is definitely worth talking about on this mon. Essentially what the speed booster set does do is it allows you to outspeed things like Chen Pao. And if you outspeed things like Chen Pao, all of a sudden, you can threaten them, quite a bit under their trick rooms, right? Sorry, you can threaten them a lot with, like redirection plus just like Tachyon Cutter, doubling into it, right? But the one issue I believe is Tachyon Cutter will not KO Terra Chen Pao, which is the only issue with this set. If they go Terra Ghost, I believe they just live it. And because of that, we do more often than not see people actually running, what's it called here? Running the modest, just max here. The main reason for modest max really is, if you go max speed here, you outspeed all Urshifus that aren't what's it called, Triscuff, because a lot of them are just adamant. And then 2, you just put out so much damage that it really doesn't matter, right? If for example, you one-shot Urshi Dark, you one-shot Chen Pao, like there's a lot of mods you just one-shot through your focus satches. One-shots Fluttermane. I actually don't think Speed Booster one-shots bulky Fluttermane as well, which is definitely something to keep in mind. So yeah, this set I do think is also really good. It just depends if you want to have a faster mode or not. But this team obviously is very dedicated to hard trick room, and because of that, I do think maybe having a crown that is a bit slower can be beneficial. But finally here too, we just got the very standard hat set. This is just the Life Orb Terra Psychic set. Your job is basically to deal as much damage as possible under Trick Room. It's, yeah, very, very simple. So next up here, we have Jonah's team. Now look, this team here is just, I don't want to call it 2-2-2 Dozo, but it's as close to it as you can really have, right? You got the Dark Shifu here with Terra Stella. Really, this is just saying like, hey, I'm going to deal as much damage as possible while this mon's alive. It's a very, very simple set here. Tatsugiri, this one was really interesting to me because I've never tested Life Orb Tatsugiri myself. But this is just max speed, obviously, quite a bit of damage. This one does hit naturally pretty damn hard. And then just a little bit of bulk, right? We optimized it. We hit that 149 for the Life Orb recoil. And then we just split the defensive points because why not? Yeah, very, very standard here. The Fluttermane, again, we kind of touched on this one earlier. This is a speed booster set here with Misty Terrain. Misty Terrain is cool because I do believe it stops things like, Spore and Burn, which obviously can be very important for things like Dondozo. And also, could potentially be like a little counterproductive because of Glamora with Toxic Debris, so do keep that in mind. But look, it's still cool, right? You got the Speed Booster set, you got the Icy Wind, you got Moonblast if you need the damage, and of course, Misty Terrain, I'm sure has its use cases. But yeah, we touched on the set before, so I won't go too deep into it. Tornadus, though, this is just a standard Tornadus set that I like to run. Basically, the speed tier originally was like, hey, you need to make sure you outspeed things like Urshifu, and then all of a sudden you get things like Urshifu that are speed creeping. And then, of course, I obviously just started running into things like, for example, Hisui and Arcanine, right? So because of that, I was like, you know what, Hisui and Arcanine, they're like going like jolly max speed band. They're hitting like 150, 156. I'm like, I think 158 is pretty safe. Anything more than this is like way too much investment. Anything less than this is like, it's kind of puts you in this awkward speed tier where you could be speed tying a lot of things. So I really like 158. It allows you to outspeed things like, the common bulky Ogre Pawns. It allows you to outspeed things like Adamant, Urshifu as well, which I do think is obviously very good. And of course, under Tailwind, it's a good speed tier to hit, right? You outspeed a lot of things. There are things like Roaring Moons that will hit that 156 because, 156 at +1, obviously is really good into like a lot of, the faster mons as well. So yeah, definitely something worth keeping in mind there. Glamora, now, this is a spread, again, I think is going to need to adapt over time. I believe this spread here was very similar to what Chopper Cross was running. But a friend of mine did a coaching session with Chopper, and Chopper was saying that he actually just thinks Timid max speed is just the way to go for the mirrors. Essentially, this is a mon that can threaten a one-shot onto other Glamoras with Meteor Beam. Because of that, he thinks having max speed obviously is just, yeah, it's super clutch, right? So if you want, you can go Timid. I personally like Modest because it's being paired up with, Tailwind plus Icy Wind. And if you got max speed, Icy Wind here, then I do think it's, pretty all right. But yeah, this is basically just a set. It's bulky, deals a lot of damage. And if you can start clicking Meteor Beams, honestly, it does a lot, right? And then just finally the Dozo. I'm no expert on Dozo. This was a spread given to me by a friend a while ago. I don't know if this is still the optimal spread, but essentially your max speed, because at +2 you outspeed things like Adamant and Modest, Qian Pao, and of course Fluttermane, which I do think is very, very important. Basically you're just pumping into Spadef because it's like the worst stat this mon has. And I believe this attack stat does something, but unfortunately, I'm not entirely too sure what it is. I'm not a Dozo player, but yeah, look, it's still a cool team. If you like Dozo, I definitely think it's worth trying out. So the next one here is Nils VGC's top 8 team. Now, I don't think Nils has actually publicly put this team out, but it is still very, very cool, right? So this team is essentially centered around Roaring Moon, basically just getting a lot of support and winning the game, right? So when you have a look at Raging Bolt here, the cool thing with Bolt is this is a very offensive mon that is also very, very bulky. Because of that, I don't think Neil in particular would be running much speed on this thing at all. I think he would be like, hey, I want to hit that bump, which really 187 is kind of the standard for this mon. And then it's like, make it just as bulky on the physical end as possible, right? Max out the HP, put as much physical defense in as you can, and really just split the SPDF here simply because you got Assault Vest, right? So you got the AV buffing up SPDF. So let's like, hey, let's just get as much physical defense as we can, make this mon, just live forever. And then you got things like Terror Electric, Thunderclap, Thunderbolts. Just does a lot of work, right? It's really good. Amoonguss, we've touched on it before. I don't want to really go too much into it. It's just a good one. You pair this thing up with the Roaring Moon. You say, hey, I can spore stuff. I can redirect. Roaring Moon can then just set up its DDs. The Roaring Moon set as well, I'll quickly kind of touch on here. The reason for this offensive spread here, where you're like 252 max and only 4 speed, is because this mon, even if you get intimidated, still gets the attack boost. So that is basically why everyone runs like the max attack here, because you still want to get the attack boost. Because even if you -1, you still then get the attack boost. And while it's not quite the same, this one hits so damn hard anyway. Even at -1, the acrobatics coming off this thing can still really slap. And then for the defense here, I kind of just split here. For anyone who doesn't know, you get diminishing returns on any defensive stat that is over 50% of your HP stat. So that's why I've just gone 202 and 101 here. Basically just making it exactly even, which I do think is very good. I think if you really wanted, you could probably drop some HP and go into the physical defense here, but I'm not entirely sure on like what like a great spread is for the bulk on this mon. I don't know if there's anything in particular it can live. Because of that, I just go really simple and just split it. What do I talk about next? I guess we'll just go to the Ogre Pawn here. This is just, again, the very standard bulky set. Essentially, the defense on this allows it to live things like Banded E-Speed, which I think is very good. You do live it by a little bit. You can definitely drop the physical defense down a little bit if you want, but I do think having that little bit of extra obviously is very, very nice. The speed, again, it's just a speed tier I'm personally really comfortable with. It's the speed I ran at Brisbane. I just think it's really, really good. If you wanted, you can definitely run something like 170. My issue with going something like 170 is like, one, this is meant to be a support mon, not like the, not a mon that's meant to deal damage. You don't need it to deal with things like, Landorus Incarnate on this team. And two, its job really is just to be a support. Most of the time, you're just going to be redirecting anyway. But I do think, having a little bit of speed just to get off some attacks is very nice. But look, if you wanted, really, you could do the old, you could do the old Adamant 76 here and then just kind of pump a little bit into speed and just call it a day. I definitely think that is also definitely very viable. The Incineroar set here, now, again, the funny thing with Incin is always trying to figure out what speed tier you want, right? There are people who run, less than 100%, like less than 31 IVs, I should say, sorry, because they want to underspeed everything and make sure their parting shots always go off last. There are other people who just want to, run really fast so their fake outs always go first, right? It's entirely team dependent. I'm assuming, looking at Neil's team, it is slower. I just looking at it, I think he wants to play it slow and bulky. And putting a lot into the special defense, I do think it's very important on a set like this. And I don't think he cares that much about the Incineroar actually dealing damage. And that's why I've just gone with this, right? We hit the bump on the SPDF. We max out the HP, just making sure it's efficient with the Figgy Berry. We split into the attack and the speed because we don't really need it. And they just pump the rest into defense. Because while this mon obviously has Intimidate, it is still not, amazing into things like Urshi, Rapid Strike, right? So I think having that bit of extra defense paired up with the Terra Grass obviously does go a long way. And then finally, it's just the choice specs Fluttermane. This set is just straight up ripped from Alex Underhill. It was the set he ran, I believe, with the winning team he had. Was it at Portland? I believe it was at Portland. But obviously he was special attack booster on that team. But I do think hitting a speed tier like this is very good. There are other options as well. Like I do know there are people who will go like Timid 190, or even like Timid, I think it's 191. I think it is, because that allows you to outspeed things like of course Don Dozo. Which is definitely very important. And then if you're doing something like that, you can just do like the standard physical defense. Run something like this, I think is also like really solid. It just comes down to what you want to do. Do you want to be, a bit slower but hit harder, or do you want to be, a bit like bulkier with a bit more like speed control, right? Because he does have Icy Wind here as well, which does kind of maybe lean me towards thinking he's something along these lines. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if Neil was something like this. Like that would not shock me if this was Neil's set, because he's just like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm always outspeeding Gem Powers or at least speed tying them. But yeah, look, a really cool team by Neil here. I like it. I love Roaring Moon, and it's just a really cool balance, right? It's Intimidate, Fake Out, Double Redirection, you know, good AV bond. It's just really solid. Now, I just realized we are quite far into this video, so I will try to speed things up a little bit. I may be going a little too in-depth here, but this is Toler Web's top 8 team. This is essentially just full hyper offense, right? This is the Torn Shifu Brain. This is the Fluttermane, the Ogre Pawn, just saying, hey, we deal a lot of damage. And then, of course, it's the Sai Spam, right? So I said it before, this is just the bare minimum standard set for, you know, Urshifu they like to run. If you want, I think Adamant Max Max is also completely fine on this one. It does a lot of damage. It's partner in crime, of course, Tornadus here. Its job here is like, hey, I'm here with Rain Dance. I'm also here with Icy Wind. Again, this is the minimum I would run. I do think you could definitely, you know, make an argument for going max speed on this thing. But again, that's entirely up to you if you want the bulkier variant or if you want the faster variant. I personally like bulkier. I think, you know, having this Mon survive an extra turn or two is very important. But again, maybe it doesn't fit your team. You want to run faster, right? On this team here as well, we've got back to, you know, the special attack boost we kind of touched on earlier. This really is just, again, really strong with things like Female and DD, right? It's like, hey, I've got this redirection mod, I've got the helping hand. This mon's job is just to pump out as much damage as possible. And also, too, you can pair it up with, of course, Tornadus and maybe get up the early Tailwind, eventually get into the Iron Crown and just sweep through, right? Because 150 is still a very solid speed tier. The only issue, obviously, is things like, you know, Speed Booster, Fluttermane, and Iron Bundle do actually outspeed you. But of course, you don't really care that much because what are they doing to you anyway, right? Just don't protect in front of the Iron Bundle when he clicks like Encore or something and you'll be fine. And then again, just standard, we touched on it before. You could run that, you know, the faster set that we said Neil had. Oh yeah, dude, I'm like looking at this. I'm like, what, Protect plus choice specs? They actually talked about this on Tub Takes. It's essentially if you get knocked off or if you just want to really stall out a turn, you know, Protect then pivot out. It is good. That's why they run Protect there. But again, this is just the standard set I like to run because I like mine to hit a bit harder. But of course, if you want to be slower, bulkier, use the set we just talked about before. And finally, the Ogre Pawn Herflame. Wolf did basically come out and say, hey, this is definitely the best set for it. I've tested this one. I don't think you would want to run any other set. I think you want as much damage as possible and as much speed as possible. Because really, this mon, if it terrors, just does so much damn damage. It's disgusting. Then we also have here Stefan's top 8 team. Now, this is the team that I have a lot of experience with. I've done a lot of testing with it. I'm a huge fan. Obviously, anyone who's been around the channel for a while knows I'm a big fan of, you know, the Chi-Yu plus the Fluttermane. This is essentially my spreads. I'm not going to go, you know, super in depth with it. I've spoken about them a lot. This is like my Brisbane spread, right? It's got the bulk to live things like the Banded, you know, D-Knight E-Speed, which I think is very important when you pair it up with something like Fluttermane. It's just bulky. It's fast. It is, you know, speed creeped here with the Tornadus, because there are situations where I do think you want the Bleak Wind Storm to go first, you know, especially before going for like the Ivy Cudgel or the Horn Leech. Urshi Dark here, it's the standard, you know, focus sash set. Don't really need to go into it. This is my old preferred Fluttermane spread. Again, this is what I believe I ran at Brisbane. Again, you could definitely, you know, adapt this. If you want this to be, you know, speedier, you could run something like this, right? It's the minimum bulk I would suggest running. If you really wanted, you could run like the other set here. Like this is also okay, I think. It really just comes down to entirely how you want to personally play it. Chi-Yu, I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is, I think, the optimal spread for a choice spec set. You could maybe convince me like there's some modest set that's like maybe better. But I just really like this set. I think you should always split your defenses. I think it's nice on Chi-Yu. And Terrifier's Pog. For anyone who doesn't know, Terrifier's choice specs Heat Wave will just carry like any Giraffe, which means like, hey, Giraffe, if you're playing with like, say, you lead with Fake Out and you pair this like with Shifu plus Chi-Yu, it's like, hey, if you don't, you know, Fake Out my Shifu, it's just got to like either 1, force the Terror on the Giraffe, or 2, kill it. But then 2, it's like, you know, I can just go Terrifier and just like run through you. So it's, yeah, it's pretty good, right? Terrifier Heat Wave is just really strong. We touched on this set before. It's just, you know, again, pretty standard. This is bulky helmet. It's a good set. I will probably say too, I personally like Terra Ghost here and Terra Steel here, but that's just me. This is Stefan's team, not mine. And then finally, Glamora, we looked at it before. Because I pair this thing up with Tornadus and Chi-Yu, I do just like having as much, you know, special attack as possible. I think going, you know, modest max speed is fine. Timid max speed is also really good. As I said before, I tested it at a local. It is very solid. Now, we are starting to get to some of the spicier teams here. This is Nick Donnell's second place team. I realize now in hindsight, maybe I should have put these teams first simply because they're the teams that people are probably more interested in. But look, as I said, it's kind of just the way I went about it. I started at Charlotte and I went down, right? So that's why Wolves' team is the last team, because it's the first team I picked. But yeah, look, this is a cool team here by Nick, right? Very interesting in a sense that like it's one of like the first, you know, Iron Hands we've seen in a while, but it's also just like this hybrid Trick Room Tailwind team, right? The Iron Hand set, it's very simple, right? He does not have Assault Vest on it, therefore I'm maxing out the Spadef. I'm hitting the 100 and, you know, the 240 HP mark, because again, it's just optimal with the Spadef spread, right? In terms of the attack, we're just hitting the second bump because this mon pumps out damage as it is. It hits really hard. especially too when you pair it with things like close combat and heavy slam, and then really just dumping into the defense and the speed. If you wanted, you could maybe drop a bit of this, drop this down to like 76 and run faster if you wanted. You could even drop this down to like 110 and even run it even faster. I have run it as fast as like 196 myself in the past, but I do think having the bulk obviously goes a long way, especially too when you're pairing it up with, potential trick room coming out of the draft here. Not going to touch on this set. We've spoken about it before. I don't have the, I don't have the Ogre Pawn on this team, so that's why it's 157. But because you are Icy Wind, again, you could definitely go more if you wanted, into the speed, that is. I did put 44 special attack here just to talk about it. I don't know the calc off the top of my head, but I think 44 special attack allows you to like KO no bulk Urshis. I could be wrong on that. It might require Chi-Yu for it. But I put it there basically just to mention it, right? It's kind of a reminder to myself. But again, if you wanted, you could definitely just run this. I think that's still really good, especially when you got Terra Steel. It makes you very bulky. Dark Shifu, we've touched on it. It's the same set. I've left Jolly here because it's an option. The main reason really is because there are sometimes you want to lead something like Giraffe plus Urshifu, and you go for the Helping Hand plus like, Terra Dark Wicked Blows. So sometimes you do want Jolly for that. But again, that's very best of 3, kind of thing. I do think Adamant is the better nature, and I would suggest going Adamant. The Giraffe here, this is just a hybrid set, really. When I look at Giraffe in particular on this team, its job is to support, not to deal damage. We will talk about Giraffes that deal damage shortly when we look at Wolf's team. But really, this was just kind of me trying to get this thing as bulky as possible, all round, right? That's why it's kind of split. The 86 speed as well as for Tailwind, that allows you to outspeed a lot of base 100s. There's basically anything in that, 100 to 101, 102 range, it'll allow you to outspeed, which is obviously very, very important. And this mod, obviously, it can be a Trick Room setter. It can be, an Imprison mod. Imprison plus Dazzle and Gleam is actually kind of funny into, like, Specs Flutter Main as well, which is definitely something to keep in mind. But yeah, pretty cool here. Blood Moon Ursaluna. Now, this one is, like, weird, because I've seen a lot of people talk about this. There will be people who will sit there and say, like, hey, Scott, this is a Trick Room mod, just, like, run 0 speed, yeah? But then there are also people out there who are generally running this thing, like, I am not shitting you, there are people who are running this. And the reason for this is because at 208, you outspeed Flutter Mane, you outspeed Iron Bundle, and you outspeed Qian Power that aren't booster energy, obviously. So there are, unironically, people who just run this set here, which is completely fine. I go to 85 because I still want to be able to function in Trick Room. And then really the bulk we kind of touched on there was literally just like me trying to split, right? So, wait, was it me trying to split? Yeah, something like that, I think, is what I had. I forget exactly what I had there originally. Maybe I just had it all into my HP, knowing me. But I do think a little bit of Spadef does go a long way on this mod. But yeah, look, this mod, it's like, hey, pair it up with Giraffe into Trick Room, it slaps. Maybe get Tailwind up, and it still slaps, right? It's very, very strong. Again, I actually do unironically think this is a good spread. If you're going to run it on a team like this, this is still really good, because a lot of the time people will look at it as a Trick Room mod, and they'll kind of prep for the Trick Room, and then if you get it under Tailwind, all of a sudden, it's just so fast and does a lot of damage. And then finally, Ogre Pawn, we kind of touched on it before. I think this is the optimal set. It's the best set. Just run this set. Now, finally, the last team I want to touch on here is Wolf Glick's winning team. Now, I'm not going to lie. I've said it before in a video. I have seen Wolf spreads. They are out in the public. And because of that, I don't like these aren't his spreads. I just want to throw that out there. These are not Wolf spreads, but they are very close. I'm not going to lie. They are very, very close. And I'll kind of like briefly touch on it in a sense. So Wolf's Giraffe is very offensive. And that's why you can see here, I'm hitting 156. This obviously is really good with a throat spray. You've still got a decent amount of bulk here all round. And I will put that there. But Wolf does use this thing as a Trick Room mod as well. I'll put it out there. He is modest, but he does use it on the Trick Room. But yeah, so this is kind of like very similar to what he does here. This one basically says like, hey, I shit out damage, right? If you let me get +1 off like a Hyper Voice, I start doing a lot of damage. My Hyper Voices slap, my Psychic slap, I do a lot of damage, right? The Flutter Mane here is meant to be very, very bulky, but also, still hitting speed tiers it likes, right? So 180 basically, even without its booster, outspeeds, a lot of common stuff like max speed Ogre Pawn, max speed Tornadus, stuff like that, right? So it's very important to keep that in mind. And then I've kind of just gone what I would deem to be, the standard bulk on this one. As a matter of fact, actually, I think this is better. I think 157 is what you want to hit for something like, it's like Shadow Ball from like max attack, special attack Flutter Mane or something like that. I forget entirely off the top of my head. But yeah, honestly, knowing Wolf, he, for all we know, he could be something like this, right? He could be something like this. I do think he actually did show his spreads on stream. Not spread, sorry, his HP stat. But yeah, I think something like this is very, very simple, right? You got the speed booster, right? So we know he was speed booster as well. So you want the speed to be higher, right? So that's why I've gone 180, 173. And then obviously he was quite bulky as well, right? Again, these spreads are very, very close to what I know Wolf ran. I didn't want to exactly give you guys his spreads because, again, they're on his Patreon. If you want the spreads, go there. I guess it's probably the best place to find it. But look, it's really cool. I played a guy at a local who referred to it as just Xerneas because you get the speed boost from the booster energy. You click Calm Mind twice, and now apparently you're Xerneas. So yeah, I guess that's kind of cool as well. With the Rillaboom, this is just my Rillaboom spread or one of the ones I like to use. It's just, again, very bulky. You know, with Assault Vest, like, you tank a lot. There is actually a calc. I think it's something like this off memory. I think it's actually this. I think this calc here allows you to live Blood Moon from Blood Moon Ursa Luna. Like, maybe it's like with Terra Normal. I forget exactly. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as well. But I do like running mine just a little, a little bit, bulkier than that, right? I like to go like the 144 here and just drop this down just a wee little bit. But yeah, that's how I kind of like to run it. Do with that what you will. Wolf set here, this was just a full bulk, Incineroar. He didn't have any offensive investment into it. And yeah, he was just kind of really, really bulky. He wanted to obviously, be as bulky as possible, which is pretty good. And Terra Ghost is, also pretty good on this one as well. Obviously, it helps out into the fake out mirrors and stuff like that. Not to mention just all around pretty good. I will link this. This is Wolf's spread, guys. Again, he publicly stated, hey, I think Max is the best. I think he said it on stream. So yeah, that is his set. I think this mod's really good. The like SD into like Glide plus Mold Breaker is so good into opposing Blood Moons because like they sit there and they're like, oh, I've got my armor, my armor tail, and then you just go bop. And it's like if you can force them to like not have a Terra, then it just puts them in a really shitty spot. And then finally, Urshi, we touched on it before. This is just the bare minimum spread I like to run. I think it's good. It's a good spread, right? It's the defensive ability this spread has, I think, is definitely worth it because all of a sudden stuff that one-shot you, all of a sudden doesn't. But yeah, look, guys, anyway, that's it for the teams I want to touch on today. I do apologize for being super vague about this team. I feel weird knowing the spreads, but obviously it's not I'm not the person who should be giving them out publicly, if you know what I mean. I do apologize. It's weird. I feel bad even saying it. Like, I probably shouldn't even mention I know the spreads, but I feel disingenuous sitting here being like, hey, this is what he could run when I know what it is. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's it for this one. I guess let me know down below what you think of the teams, and if there's any of them that you're excited to test out. But yeah, that's going to be me for this one. I'll catch you to the next one. Peace.